Well, so yeah, we've got a panel session here today. So my name's Luke Pearce, as Annie has kind of introduced, and I actually work for FDM CCS Insights. So that's even more letters for you in terms of my role here. But yeah, I kind of lead up some of the research at the GSA, where I'm involved with the private network special interest group. So we've also got Thomas and Jaymy on the panel. So Thomas, we'll start with you. Do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I'm Thomas Gere. I'm from O2 Business, which is basically a joint venture of Telefonica and Liberty Global in the UK, and I look after enterprise 5G networks.
Thanks very much. And Jaymy?
Hi everyone, I'm Jaymy. I'm the VP product for Proximus Global, and we are a company based in Brussels, operating globally. We specialize in voice messaging, IoT, roaming, basically connecting everyone, everywhere, and everyone, anything, everywhere. That's the motto of our company. Well, I'm happy to
Fantastic.
be here today.
Great. So yeah, two very expert panelists on the topic, both kind of dealing with private 5G from a kind of operator perspective, and dealing with some of the kind of customers and networks. So I guess the topic we've got to discuss today is are we really seeing progress with private 5G, industrial 5G, talked about for a long time, always a big promise of the 5G era to really invigorate business and industrial enterprise. So we'll kind of recap with the panel in terms of have we seen progress with there, and then we'll also look a bit forward as well. Will the market have changed much by 2030 in 4 years time when we might be looking at some of the first 6G implementation? So really kind of assessing where we've come and where we've still got to go. So to kick us off, I'll just quickly touch on some of the work we've been doing here at the GSA and the Special Interest Group, because we actually track some of the customer references, the number of private networks on a quarterly basis. Since the fourth quarter of 2021. And we publish that every quarter. The latest report is up on the GSA site very recently, the first Q1 2026. And the goal really is to accurately represent PMN traction because, as we will discuss today, the different the exact number of private networks is sometimes hard to determine. Some of those details not necessarily made public, especially as we're kind of reaching more maturity. So within that group, we pull in the customer references of the number of private networks across different markets, and that was set up by Nokia, Huawei, and Ericsson, but now also represents 17 different companies, including some of the Airspan, Salona, Mavenir, JMA Wireless, and some of the alliances as well. And we're counting customer references over €100,000 because some of these are quite big deployments, big campus deployments on site. And the latest number we've got is over 2,000, so 2003 customer references as of Q1 2026. And that's a decent number. We've seen steady growth, I think about 21% compound annual growth rate from 2021. Grew a lot, I think, in the number between 2020, which it was about 448, to about 700 in 2021, 1,000 in 2022. So we're seeing steady growth, but 2,000 overall, maybe not as big as perhaps some people would have thought. It's just a note, these are the number of customers we're counting. Some of those customers might be deploying one or more networks, and we can touch upon multi-site networks, I think, on the panel in a minute. And it doesn't include revenue too. So, more money spent on use cases, on devices, on some of those applications. But it is global. 88 countries have at least one private mobile network now. The United States is probably by far the leads with the most references, but Europe is pretty strong too, particularly Germany and the UK, which are kind of second and third. A lot still based on LTE. So, when we talk about private networks and private 5G, actually, a lot of it is still LTE only. About 50% of that is LTE only, although 30% of that is 5G only, and about 18% is a mix of the two. And we are seeing the proportions swing towards more 5G, as you might expect. And it's across a number of verticals, which we'll talk about too. Manufacturing is the one that gets talked about the most, perhaps, and that is the one in our data set with the most. But perhaps some of the more interesting and mature verticals are things like mining or airports or seaports or oil and gas, where actually some of the applications are being used a bit more extensively, and there's more of those working well today. So we are seeing some progress, I think, and more private networks are becoming slightly more affordable. They're still expensive. We're starting to see new deployment models, things like as a service subscriptions, managed services, hybrid networks as well, with the public network, which I think we will talk a lot about on the panel today. So access to spectrum also becoming easier. So a few different kind of things driving PMN adoption across those different verticals. So that was the kind of introduction over. We are seeing some progress, but is it the kind of progress we were expecting? Thomas, let's start with you in terms of where are you seeing traction most? How would you evaluate the private network market today?
Yeah, so for me, I think I've been involved since the pre-launch of 5G, around 10 odd years ago. And I'm seeing a lot of traction, I would say in the last 2 years, especially. So in the past, it was more very mission critical, operations. They needed a fully resilient network, just an end-to-end local network, if you like a private LAN, but they had limitations. If the site is huge, they needed a wireless connectivity that could actually, scale and have square mile coverage for connected workers and push to talk comms. So very simple use cases. And often you had, as you mentioned, private 4G, being rolled out. So let's say since 2012, more or less, some ports, some types of, factories. And therefore, those have been very bespoke projects. And then what we've been seeing in the last few years is basically more and more RFPs, from, for example, transport and logistics, so ports and airports, needing to implement use cases. So really, it's outcomes based. So, for example, in airports, they need to rescan luggages and cargo before it goes into the planes. And to do that, they need full wireless connectivity. They need it to be completely resilient. So, it cannot be based, on a cloud-based core or, a public network. It needs to be functioning like a private LAN. So they've been issuing more and more RFPs, for those. Ports are the same. So they have basically 24/7, around the clock operations. They're connecting workers. They're connecting sensors now. So it's a lot easier to deploy predictive maintenance than it used to be in the past. In the past, you need to work with a consultancy firm. And I think with Gen AI, we've seen in our customers a lot more scaled adoption and leveraging connected sensors to basically implement predictive maintenance and multi-agency, for the operations to bring more efficiency and productivity, as well as AI cameras for health and safety and security. So a lot more use cases, basically, a lot more complex ones. They need a lot more, if you want, density of connections at the same time. So the network needs a lot more capacity. So that's something they couldn't do with Wi-Fi, even with the best mesh Wi-Fi with the latest generations. If you have scale mile sites, you can't deploy, lots of cabling and access points and make sure there's no handover issues. So, I mean, obviously we have nothing against Wi-Fi. We deploy Wi-Fi as well. We have hybrid deployments where we might have, Wi-Fi with public 4G or 5G, with private 4G and 5G. So it's just really depending on the customer needs, and we try to keep it simple for them. It's more just bring the connectivity, and if in the background you have a mix of technologies, even including LP1, like, LoRaWAN, that's fine. We just want to serve the use cases the best we can. and make it scalable. So when the network has more demand, so for example, airports, we have more runways. They're gonna need more, in the future, more connectivity. So you need a network that's ready for that. So we try to plan ahead as well. So that's what we're seeing at the moment.
Interesting. Good. Yeah, a different kind of use cases coming up and a broader range. Jaymy, is that what you see as well? Any kind of particular verticals or areas that are getting more traction in recent years?
Uh, yeah, I would say so. I'm not an analyst like you, but I would say what we have seen in the market around the world very much aligned with what you have shared earlier. Um, so, I mean, I've been following this segment as well for quite a while. We see that there are certain acceleration in uptake in some countries, for example, China, US, like you mentioned, but not but and also update in certain verticals, which those that Thomas has touched on, airports, ports, mission critical, I would say, and industrial use cases. So we have seen this a lot, but I do agree that the progress is slower than what we are expecting as well since a couple of years. And I think there are a couple of things that is hindering, mainly cost of adoption, um, and then the complexity to build and to operate. Because typically enterprise are very used to building and operating IT infrastructure, and this is much more I would say telco based infrastructure. It's a different technology, and also different components around it, right? Because it's not just the core or the RAN. You have the devices that you need to take care of, and the entire ecosystem. It's quite different. So I guess that is why it's lower than expected. But we do see. I think today the ones that make their business case positive are mainly the bigger deployments. Like airports. We see that quite a lot in ports. And then what we have seen in the market, because they come to us. In fact, when they want to scale beyond their initial use cases, when they want to build in use cases where it requires interworking or interoperability between private, public, because many use cases that they started with, it's really contained in the private network. But then eventually you will need, even if everything is automated, something goes wrong, you need to inform people, and people may be outside. They will not be in the private network all the time. So then you will need this interworking, interoperability part with the public network. So we see that quite a lot. Private network comes to us because typically that's where we work. We work in the space where we help operators interop, or we help to solve interoperability or interworking issues. Basically, we are, Proximus Global, we are the bridge between operators. So we have quite a lot of technologies internally that we have built over the years. Could be reused, but I see that a cost-effective solution is really needed, and that's it's hindering adoption even in the interworking and interoperability side. So only the really big MPNs, they can private networks, they can afford those solutions. So that's quite the gap in this market still today. But we do provide some, for example, also for SIM resilience. So in case the private network is down, the private network would like to leverage on the public networks, and we have a SIM technology that we can enable the private network to leverage on all the public networks in the location in the country. So that's something interesting. That we have seen, which is quite fitting with the hybrid model for private networks. It's voila. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. You've touched on some interesting topics there. I think the the role of the telco in private 5G, I think, is an interesting topic to explore a little bit because, yeah, you talked about potentially not seeing, it has been a bit slower, and actually a lot of the private networks don't always have that telco component. I think Nokia said around 33% of their private networks are directly without that element to it. And Thomas, you talked about kind of working with consultants and the complexity of these environments and across kind of a devices and spectrum and all kind of things that are sometimes quite vertical specific as well. So yeah, I mean, but the one thing I think telcos do bring to the table, as you mentioned, Jaymy, is that kind of role of hybrid public and private networks. Thomas, is that something you're also starting to see more, that kind of move away from kind of a campus-like private network where it's all quite isolated, but having now aspects that do kind of slice with the public network or roam onto the public network in some ways? Is that something that O2 Business are also now seeing as a result of kind of standalone, really, isn't it, in terms of having that standalone core as Annie mentioned as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it more as like a speed dial, if you like. So, you can start when you don't have too many mission critical, use cases with a public network extension, like a DAS or with some macros outdoor. And then as you scale and those use cases become more mission critical, at least some of them can be you can attach a private network, onto it. And that's something that, we're looking into, and we've done it in other countries. As Telefonica, I think Katia probably mentioned that earlier on, in her keynote. And when we do that, you have the opportunity, to be able to be on both, networks and just reserve. I think Airbus has been publicly mentioning that as well. If you have in your operation some secret areas where you just want full data sovereignty, you will have coverage only for the private network. And once the engineers and some of the workforce are coming out of that zone, if you like, in some of the manufacturing, then they might be able to make and receive public network calls and be connected to the public network. And also when they are roaming to some other of their, multinational operations. So that's what we're seeing. And in the longer term, there will be dual IMSI, so the same SIM that can go, and hop onto the, different networks, as long as, you're keeping full data sovereignty, when you have, very high cybersecurity, demands. So we're definitely, looking into that at the moment. We're seeing more demand for it, but we're also trying to explain, that it comes, with some caveats.
Hmm.
If the public network is down for whatever reason, if there's an emergency event, if your architecture is depending on it, you lose your network. So that's something to take into account. So if you have a mission critical operation in a critical national infrastructure, like an airport, or a power station, you want the network to stay on and be fully resilient. So that's something that we're trying to design accordingly, depending on the operation and the use case. So it really depends. Yeah. Yeah. And just to go back, on the adoption in the previous subject, one thing as well is on the costs. We've seen more or less a 30 to 40% drop in cost, from the private network costs. So that's something we're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's just the network itself, and on the devices as well. So a lot more devices. That was one of the issue before as well, at the early days of 5G. That's where there was still a lot of private 4G being ramped up. So an example for us is the 4 British Sugar sites where we deployed private networks a few years ago in the UK. And those are still on 4G, because they're just very, foundational use cases at the moment, like connected worker and comms. And the devices were basically the decision maker for them between the different types of networks. There were not enough, 5G devices at the time, but now it has changed. And that's something that, even the price differential between 4G and 5G devices, or Wi-Fi to 5G devices, is not that big anymore. So if we look at logistics, we're seeing a lot of growth in logistics at the moment. So warehouses, if you like barcode scanners, they also have, like, business apps on them. In the past, there used to be maybe a 50% price between the existing Wi-Fi device and the 4G or 5G one. Now it's just 10%, 10 to
Okay.
15%, a very small one. So that's really the important decision factor, I think, for some of our customers. They're looking at, do they need to refresh all the devices? Does it need to be
Mm,
a completely different device? How much is it going to cost us? Or can it be
mm,
the same device with a small increment in costs, but we're getting, full coverage with, higher bandwidth so we can deploy more use cases at the same time, like robotics.
mm.
So,
Yeah. Okay. Good. So yeah, good to see that that cost is coming down a little bit, and particularly for 5G in terms of the device availability as well. What are the use cases? Is there a kind of killer use case for 5G relative to LTE, or for that kind of transition that is going to drive more adoption of 5G private networks? And also, what about kind of 5G red cap? Do we see that playing a role in particularly driving the cost down and the availability of devices? I don't know if either of you have a thought on that at all.
for me, RedCap is mostly in China at the moment. They've been the
Mm,
early adopters. It's growing. It's on our, on our, we're looking into it at the moment. There's not many devices, just to go back to the devices topic.
mm,
There's not many devices available. But basically, what it's going to help with is to have low power consumption. So you could have more 5G if you want capable, sensors and devices with a longer power life, and that's what it will bring. So it's definitely, on the roadmap, longer term roadmap. But at the moment, yeah, we're still on LTE-M
mm, mm.
and the NB-IoT, and happy with
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
There's a very
Okay.
large network for those. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then,
Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
we have the spectrum for those as well. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, we can get on to Spectrum in a minute. And by the way, there is a Q&A available, and we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So there's already a couple coming in. So please submit your questions, and we should be able to get round to them as well. But yeah, interesting you mentioned China, Thomas, because that is a very unique telco market, and particularly for private networks. Although we're talking about 2,000 or a few thousand deployments in the rest of the world, China, the numbers that come out of China are in the kind of 50,000 or 60,000, I think is the latest in terms of the number of private networks there. And a lot of that is because they aren't kind of campus private network deployments, but they are hybrid or kind of virtual private networks that use the 5G SA core. And Jaymy, that's something you're talking about, I think, with that kind of hybrid element with the public-private network, and an example of scale there, that is potentially how we reach that level of scale, particularly in some industries as well. Is that right? Is that how you would see it?
Yeah, so that, like I mentioned, I think China is one of the markets um, that have that successfully unlock the mid market segment in private networks. Um, Personal opinion is that I think it's also thanks to the capability of the MNO, because in China most of the MNO has shifted to full 5G themselves. So
Hmm.
that has given them as well the capability to support, for example, slicing on their public network. So they could slice their public network, they could slice their infrastructure to support virtual private networks use cases. And that's definitely, I think, one of the key criteria to unlock the mid segment, because then the cost, it's a shared cost, right? Essentially, it makes it more sustainable for private networks to adopt, the private 5G technology, and also in that model, the complexity is also offloaded because the MNO holds the complexity of running the private networks. That helps a lot. Like I mentioned in the beginning, telco and IT infrastructure is quite different. You'll need expertise at the enterprise side. And I guess, I mean, with the public virtualization on the public network, that could really be a key differentiator as well. Uh,
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So we touched on that, and in terms of kind of market education, how much is that still a challenge today, when we are dealing with a relatively smaller scale, when we're talking to IT departments or OT departments. Thomas, you mentioned kind of that mix of Wi-Fi in there as well, and potentially a mix of technologies. And mobile is quite different for some of these IT and OT firms to be using in those environments. Do you find that changing in any way, that level of education, particularly regarding some of the kind of complexity? Is that still a challenge, or are you seeing signs of that changing in any way?
Yeah, I think there's a big change. We're seeing more single pane of glass, IT designed, platforms for them to manage the network, and the users, so that, if they have a private LAN with, Wi-Fi ecosystem and 5G and, probably some SD-WAN, to have a security wrap, they would be having, one existing platform that they are used to. So that's the way we're trying to basically onboard them, is to keep, if possible, the same tools that they're already using, and just add integrations, so that, they're able to basically continue as they are,
Mhm.
and they're familiar with it, and they basically don't have to have any, telecom engineers, within the management of the platform or for the support. So we're trying to make it as simple as possible,
Mhm.
and basically, as easy to adopt, for the IT teams as well, so that they can, just scale it, and that they don't have to worry if it's 5G or Wi-Fi or any other technology. Yeah. So there's quite
Mhm.
a big convergence at the moment happening, I think, from many vendors, and that's really useful, I think, for the end customers. Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of blueprint idea that we're seeing, and Jamie, are you seeing that across different sites? You work with kind of multinationals across different countries. How easy is that to replicate those networks in multiple sites and multiple environments with SIM provisioning and those kind of things?
Um, yeah, we do see that a lot. So I believe to replicate the MPN across multiple sites, since everything today is virtualized, that's quite easy.
Mhm.
I mean, you still need some investment, of course, but it's quite easy. But the complexity comes on more the how's it, when you have users moving between those sites,
Mm.
how do you make sure that security is still being I mean, it's still being really secure, that you are welcoming, that you can authenticate that this user is coming from your other private networks into your network and stuff like this. So in those cases, yes, it's a little bit more complex than just to power up a new MPN in a new site. So those are the interworking cases that we see that
Mhm.
MPN is still trying to work out. Or many MPNs also try to offer their network, since they have built the network, build their different use cases in different layers, but then they would also like to offer to external users who's coming into their partners, like in logistic, maybe their transport partners. I mean, in industrial segment, maybe their transportation partners. They would like that the trucks coming into their factory, that the trucks can be connected, but the trucks are belonging to another company. How can they connect external users securely? So those are things still being worked out a lot, I would say, in the private network space.
Mm.
But essentially, the adoption of 5G, it is not the technology that's driving it, it's the use cases.
Mhm.
5G is really powerful, in my opinion. Um, it can unlock many use cases that we are, and enable it to be easier adopted than today. For example, Thomas, I mentioned that there are many use cases that, historically requires so much cabling, and this is the first win that uh, enterprise can benefit from, because with private 5G you can slice your LAN in a way, so like your network, your private network. You can slice it. You can put different applications, and you can ensure the performance of it. But essentially, it is the need of the enterprise. Then the technology comes in. You see, it's not that because everyone is doing private 5G, I should also do. It really depends on what is the need. Then the design should come, whether you combine private 5G with public or with Wi-Fi or
Yeah, definitely. I think
I
that's
agree. Yeah,
something. Yeah, go on, Thomas.
yeah. No, yesterday actually, I was talking to a customer that is working on a very large infrastructure construction project in the UK. And that's exactly, what they were asking about is when they have contractors coming to the site, how can they connect, to the network and private network? And yeah, there are new solutions now like eSIM. So you can have, a set of users that, the site managers will know will come into, and they will push to their devices or send them an email, with a way to activate an eSIM so they can have access to the local network, either if it's, a public one for temporary access or if it's a private network, eSIM. So we're seeing more, technologies that are enabling those type of situations now that were not possible a few years ago. So that's widening as well. The use cases and the way, an industrial site or a customer, situation works. So that's something definitely that we're seeing. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think
yeah,
eSIM technology unlocks as well a lot of things.
yeah,
But I have seen. I mean, one of the challenges that we are still trying to figure out is when the incoming. I mean, eSIM works well when it's consumer or IoT. Yeah, I think in general it's okay for consumer and IoT devices. But when it's proprietary devices that you need certification before, then it's a more challenge. You cannot just put in a new eSIM, especially for example aircraft. You cannot just put in a new eSIM into an aircraft. You need to go through the whole certification process for that. So there are still challenges, but I think underlying we have so many technological breakthrough, eSIM, 5G, even satellite. This will all already help to move the private network space, I would say. But
Yeah.
definitely it's not.
Yeah, we've actually got a question around some of that, so I'll read it out now about the hybrid and some of the challenges that happen when you've got an example where, particularly in spectrum, how when you've got a case like, for example, the airport case that you're mentioning here, requiring the use of spectrum. How do we make sure it doesn't overlap with spectrum used in the public macro network versus the private? Is it different spectrum that's used, and how and also, how do you enable continuity and handover? Is those still kind of challenges between the two networks when people are kind of moving around the site? Or yeah, is that still a challenge, or is that something that's relatively kind of solvable today?
yeah. So for spectrum, there's always a check with the Ofcom and local, spectrum government body. And when you apply, in critical national infrastructure like for airport, you have checks, with the CAA and some other authorities so that the spectrums are not overlapping. And those are very busy, dense locations with a lot of, customers and consumers, basically end consumers. So yeah, the network needs to be designed accordingly, with, industrial spectrum if possible. It really depends how urban the area is in the surroundings. So it's a very complex environment, that one. But for us in more remote areas, we've seen so in the UK, there is an industrial spectrum, from Ofcom, called N77, which is for 5G standalone. And, when we use it when, it's, easier to deploy, it's easy to deploy radio infrastructure. When there isn't, when there's a challenge from the customer, maybe if it's an oil and gas and there's a lot of explosive areas, and they would really benefit from having the minimum amount of radio sites because it's hard to lay the cables, in explosive areas, etc. Then we would use, if possible, the MNO spectrum because it has higher power. So we use less radio sites in theory, for that. So, we try to do that when possible. So that's one of the big difference. But yeah, whenever we can, we use the industrial, spectrum. just so that it has more longevity as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's a question on spectrum as well around, some of the volumes I mentioned at the beginning in terms of Germany and the UK. How much is that related to the reservation of spectrum for industry directly without operator license spectrum? Interesting question. It's, hard to necessarily drive causation from that. I know a lot of countries have dedicated spectrum directly now. I think, most of the kind of top 25 countries in the GSA data that we track has licensed spectrum. But you're right, Thomas, it does sometimes have limitations, particularly in terms of power. And we see that in the US, lots of it on CBRS, which has, been great for access to that. But there are certainly some applications, particularly when you kind of get to mission critical, where, actually that shared spectrum is not kind of meet the SLAs that you're requiring as well. But it is a challenge, particularly, Jaymy, when you're looking across different countries across Europe as well, because there's different portions of spectrum that are allocated for industrial use. How is that managed today with kind of roaming agreements and things like that? Is that difficult? I think I think there is a move towards harmonization, isn't there, from the EU of spectrum for industrial across the kind of 3.8 to 4.2. But is that still a challenge having different spectrum for different SIM applications in different places?
Um, I would, I mean, as long as a spectrum available for use, I think that challenge is already, you're one step ahead already. Um, but I'm just thinking about because one of the part of the question also asked about the handover.
Mm,
Okay. So on the handover today, we do provide some solutions to private network when the user wants to go to the public. Thomas mentioned earlier multi-IMSI technology. That's one technology that we do have, and we offer it to private network. So basically, we use multi-IMSI technology when the private user want to access a public network. So it's quite similar. Authentication is very secure because it's still authenticating back to the core of the private, because sometimes that's very important for the private network. It depends on the use case, right? Either it's offloading to the edge, or sometimes it's about security. I
mm.
mean, security is top focus for them. Uh, on handover, I would say that traditionally, as we understand handover in 2G, 3G, that is no longer the criteria, because most private networks in 4G, 5G, and it's all data IP based. So what is critical in terms of handover experience is actually the latency. So basically, you don't really need like 2G, 3G, a seamless handover anymore. But basically, you need to switch with the lowest time gap, because then your voice call, which is over data, will not be interrupted. You see, because there's for like VoLTE calls, there's a minimum time gap that you need to adhere to in order for the call not to drop. And I think that we can. I mean, with all the virtualization, edge, cloud, we have ways to overcome that, to make sure that when the user switch from a public to private, that we keep it within that time gap. So essentially, it is handover. You see, there's no issue for that. But in 2G, 3G, it's a little bit different technology. You really need a seamless handover, because voice was running on the circuit switch technology,
Mm.
which yeah. So that's already good because we are all IP based now.
Yeah.
So that's good news for the industry.
Great. Okay. So yeah, some of the technical challenges being solved then. Okay. So let's just kind of recap, in terms of where we are. It's certainly a little bit slower than we expected, but there are some good signs of progress. The cost is coming down, 5G SA, hybrid networks, and some of the challenges there certainly being solved and really presenting new use cases that are resonating quite well across a number of industries. Let's look forward a little bit then to kind of 2030, which is where we're kind of heading to. Jaymy, you mentioned satellite. That's an emerging area, I think, within kind of 5G, NTN, and eventually 6G as part of that kind of ubiquitous connectivity piece. Is satellite being thought of in some of these situations a lot more? I mean, generally, a lot of private networks today are in remote sites, right? Whether that's oil and gas or utilities or mining, where they generally don't have public connectivity, which is one of the reasons why they're procuring private connectivity. How much will satellite play a role in that? And are we already starting to see some signs there? I'm interested to hear both of your thoughts on that.
I'm seeing it for a backhaul. So if the site doesn't have a fiber access yet, or there's not enough public network as a backhaul. So if you like the private network, for example, needs a, a cloud access, for management. So you need backhaul for this or connection to the web. And yeah, then we would put, a satellite connection as a backhaul, until fiber can be brought. We're seeing quite a lot as well, obviously, all the offshore, oil and gas, for example, in the North Sea, they're using satellite, as a backhaul, as well as, some proprietary, dark fiber, between some of the rigs. But that's what we're seeing at the moment on the business. And obviously, yeah, we've been rolling out a lot of satellite services as well, at the moment to consumers to start with.
Yeah.
Great.
So I mean, we are also in the doing a lot of work on NTN on the D2D, so direct to device. So I'm very excited. I think a satellite can move beyond just being playing the role in the backhaul eventually. So today we already seen that a satellite can play a role in the resiliency for the private network. So in case the private network is down with the D2D technology, in case the public coverage is not there, the private network can actually rely on satellite coverage today based on D2D technology. So the handset can actually switch from direct, if he cannot reach his private network, for example, if he's scanning the luggage, like you, it was a good example that you quoted, then the scanner can, seamlessly connect to the satellite, but still continue to perform its role, right? I mean, in the case where the public coverage is not there, satellite could be also the resilient option. But I mean, that is what we see today. But I think moving forward, satellite could be a really good option to even be the coverage provider for the private networks. So it depends on the use cases, but I believe satellite will play a key role in the future as well.
Great. So yeah, so satellite definitely going to play a key role. And I think, when we're looking forward to 2030, it's still probably a little bit early to be talking about it, but by 2030 we will, be seeing the first signs of 6G. Satellite is a part of 6G, of course. Anything AI is another big area related to 6G, kind of a new technology that we're starting to see. Any implications of AI or Gen AI that's potentially going to drive adoption more? Thomas, you've already talked about some applications where AI is already being used today, but do you see that being a big driver of new applications, and where 5G or 6G is one of the only technologies that enables those use cases relative to Wi-Fi or Ethernet or anything else?
So yeah, we're seeing quite a lot of customers that have been deploying, sensors and building, if you like, a digital twin, of their operations. And they've been doing that quite easy. I mean, the barriers to basically implement that have lowered a lot thanks to Gen AI tools. And some of them have actually, designed their own models. For example, maybe on Azure AI with Copilot, and we're seeing more demand now to actually bring those models locally. So for us, and I think that comes back to a question that's seen on the Q&A regarding use cases. The solution that we're using has an integrated edge compute, so that our customers can actually, run the use case locally for resilience, but also now it's even more valuable for generative AIs and AI models, so they can run them directly locally, on the private network or on private cloud. So if you like, AI servers in their own data center on the site. And we're seeing that this is really, increasing the demand for scalability, on the network itself. And that's going to help them to lower the cost as well. So it's the cost of inference. Instead of having to buy cloud, AI tokens, they can actually run those locally. And, for the least complex, generative AI, models and inference, that has quite a lot of value for them. So we're seeing a shift where there's more use for private AI, edge AI on the private network. So that's physical AI use cases, so robotics and computer vision, mostly those two types of use cases, can scale and be enabled more easily than they were in the past. So it's basically accelerating adoption of certain use cases, mostly physical, AI ones. And yeah, I think it's going to continue. We've seen very traditional customers actually already playing with that. We thought, they would just have very simple use, continue with just access to ERPs, comms, and tracking, but actually they have, multi-agent models running to the end devices, of their workers and sensors. So it's basically, pulling ahead. And I'm I'm not too sure about 6G yet. I don't have all the details, but I guess when all of this is scaling to a very high density, of devices that need to have local and cloud inference, then you need a network that can be in real time, supporting all this intelligence that, is active at the same time. And from, self-sufficient, AI agents, people, like us, and machines, at the same time. So you're talking about a huge amount of, connected devices locally to multi-sites. So it's adding, I guess there will be more AI management as well of the networks. So then you can really have a more hybrid network, basically, in place that is a lot easier, to manage that than today, So it's going to be exciting, I think.
Great. And you touched on that question there that's come in the chat. We've had two or three already that have woven into some of them about Spectrum. We'll ask this one now, but please feel free to input your questions as well. We'll kind of weave them into the conversation as we kind of come up to finalize the discussion. But the question is about, when kind of touching upon, I think, some of about those themes. And when we think about use cases, AI, rather than thinking about just the network, the question kind of talks about how do you see the split between connectivity and use cases in terms of the volume and expenditure between them, because the question says that they have a feeling that operators are mostly focused on connectivity part and need to and customers take connectivity for granted, whereas customers are more thinking about the use case and the devices, etc. So kind of that mentality difference between an operator who probably thinks about it from connectivity and someone else who might want to think about it from the use cases and devices. I think, Thomas, you've shown a good example there where you are thinking about, the applications of AI and what the user is hoping to do, and then working backwards, which is, I think, is the right approach. Jaymy, do you agree with that as well? In terms of, you talked a bit about this earlier, but focusing on the use cases and what we can really enable is quite key, I think, for operators to get a bigger foothold in the market.
Yeah, definitely. I think in the end, the enterprise, they are looking for solutions, right? Not bits and pieces and to fix it themselves. So all of us, the players in this industry, we need to come together. So definitely, partnership, collaboration to come with easy to consume and cost-effective solution for the private networks is key.
Yeah.
So we should not all focus on giving the individual pieces, because it's just too complex, right? And then there will be no adoption in the market. Right. Sorry, Thomas.
No, not sorry. No, I completely agree. Actually, the way we chose our current private network vendor is that it could have a marketplace of use cases that could be activated automatically, so that, if they need to track, devices, asset tracking, or enable comms, they would just, go on the private network management. There's a marketplace. You activate the functionality, and it can self-install, on the end device. And here you go. You might have a health and safety app that is functional. So it's basically geared towards, the use case. It's not a connectivity and then, okay, let me call my application partner and let's do a trial. And let me also call an edge compute first so that it can be installed there. No, we've selected, a solution that has an integrated set of use cases within the private network, and it can just be switched on so that the customer can pilot those and start, from day one, with the use cases. So it's so to answer this question in the Q&A, the expenditure is always use case based. So we actually look at the ROI from deploying the use case. How much is it going to save? So in the British sugar example is a very good example. In the past, the workers on the site used to go back and forth to offices, to log their tasks and their work permits. And they were spending X amount of minutes, per day. Instead of this, they've switched on, if you want, on their tablets, access to the digital work permits, and they saved, 20 minutes, every half day, 40 minutes. How much does it represent? And you had an immediate benefit, for them. So that's the way we price the private network, and we work with our customers to build the internal business case.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, both showing some good examples there of working backwards, which is definitely the right mentality, I think, if we're gonna see the traction that we're all expecting. So last couple of minutes now. So I think we just want to focus one last question, unless there's any more in the chat. But the what the picture will look like in 2030. We've talked about, how things are changing and technology challenges being solved and some future technologies on the horizon. So let's fast forward 4 years. We're sitting here in June 2030. 6G is probably just starting to emerge. What does the picture look like for private networks for you? Maybe realistically, maybe optimistically, but yeah, let's a take from both of you. Jaymy, do you want to kick us off?
It's always good to dream. I I would I mean ideally it would be a hyper connected world. I mean like we should not be having any gaps on connectivity. That layer should be seamless. And then basically for every enterprise it makes all the lives of the people easier to run their business to well, I mean, that's the ideal world. Maybe not in 4 years. I think it may need a little bit more time. But yeah, that's where we are working towards, I would say. Everyone plays its part. We play our part, because technologies, there's so many, like hybrid networks. You're combining many technologies as well, combining many use cases. So for Proximus Global, our vision or our mission is to be the bridge between, to bridge the gap between all these technologies and in order to unleash the use cases. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Thomas?
Yeah, the same. I think it's simplification, so it's just an enterprise network. And then in the background, you have an hybrid setup, hopefully, an intelligent one that, is just fit for purpose according to, the end user, of the customer and the locations. I think obviously it depends on the roadmap in each country for each, operator and what's available as well to the customer where they are, so there are different situations. But, ultimately, 4 to 5 years, hopefully we'll be able to, offer different options to customers. And to them, it would appear seamless. They don't have to think about, how am I going to administer so many different types of networks. No, I just have, who am I going to register on the network for until, when and where, and that's all they should be worrying about. The rest is in the background. And we just provide, the cybersecurity around it. And yeah, hopefully that's, a simpler, more flexible, basically type of connectivity to deliver any type of use case. I think that's where we want to be.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah, similar message to both of you then. Nice and simple, super easy, straightforward, just connecting up those use cases for enterprise in a nice, smooth, seamless way. All right, so I think that's it. So thank you very much, both of you. Really appreciate your views and insights and the time spent to chat today. Of course, feel free to connect with any of the panelists on LinkedIn or any other further questions if you have them.